Picture a cozy lakeside house where the warmth of a bridal shower is disrupted by a sudden storm. As laughter fills the air, a chilling silence follows the flicker of lights, leading to a shocking discovery in the pantry. In the bridal shower that went silent, secrets unravel amidst hidden motives and buried truths. Settle in. Darkness has a way of revealing what we try to keep hidden. The lake looked like tarnished metal under the January sky. Nora Pell drove with both hands on the wheel, her van's heater breathing lukewarm air that smelled faintly of cinnamon and cardboard. Reeds along the shore lay flattened by wind. The water itself held no color, only a dull sheen that caught the light and gave it back without warmth. Up ahead, the rented house sat among bare maples, its windows the pale eyes of something awake and waiting. The driveway was a narrow ribbon of mud that had started to crust with ice. Nora eased over it, tires slipping once, then finding purchase. She parked near the garage and stepped out into cold that tasted clean and sharp. Inside the van, her catering crates were stacked like a small private city. Charcuterie boards wrapped in plastic, pastry boxes, a cooler holding sparkling water and chilled fruit, a paper bag of labeled jars, almond paste, vanilla, cocoa, kept apart like quarrelsome cousins. She checked the list on her phone, then tucked it away and began the familiar work of lifting and carrying. The front door opened before she reached it. Brooke Kincaid stood framed in soft yellow light, hair pinned back in a way that made her look perpetually composed. She wore leggings and a thick sweater the color of oatmeal, and her smile came quickly, practiced like a reflex. "Nora? Thank goodness, come in. It's freezing out there." Warm air washed over Nora's cheeks. The house smelled of pine cleaner and something older beneath it, smoke and wood, a faint mineral note from the lake. Brooke took the first crate as if Nora were a guest instead of hired help. "Kitchen's through. Everyone's upstairs getting ready. We're doing the pretty part first, then food, then the games, right?" "Right," Nora said. She had learned to let clients believe they were steering. It kept them calmer. They crossed an open-plan living room with pale rugs and a stone fireplace. A long coffee table had been cleared and dressed with a runner, a stack of pastel gift boxes arranged like a display. A Bluetooth speaker sat on a sideboard beside a jar of cinnamon sticks meant to smell festive. A row of framed photos lined the mantel. Women in matching robes, women at a beach, women laughing into a camera at some bright summer when the world had seemed simpler. Brooke guided Nora into the kitchen. It was spacious and modern in its appliances, but the bones of the house were older. Uneven floorboards, cabinets that didn't quite match each other, a ceiling beam with knots like small eyes. Nora set her crate down and began to orient herself the way she always did, counting outlets, noticing where knives lived, where trash went, where the light switches were. "Pantry's right there," Brooke said, pointing toward a narrow hall off the kitchen. "It's a walk-in. You can use it for whatever." Nora nodded, then lifted the cooler and followed the hall. The pantry door was heavier than it looked, thick wood painted a clean white. A brass hasp had been screwed into the outside, and an old padlock hung there, dull, square-shouldered, the kind that had outlived the decade that made it. Beside the frame, a small hook held a single key on a loop of twine. Nora touched the padlock, felt the cold in the metal. She flipped the hasp open and stepped into the pantry. It was cool and close, lit by a single bulb. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with the house's supplies, paper towels, canned soup, extra wine. Along the far wall, a small chest freezer hummed with a steady patience. Nora turned back to the door and her hand paused. On the inside there was no knob, no latch, only a shallow, recessed pull for closing it. She stared for a beat, feeling a small professional unease. It was the kind of door meant to keep things out, animals, thieves, children, not the kind meant for people to move through safely. If it were latched from outside, it would be effectively a small prison. "Charming," Nora murmured and set the cooler down on a lower shelf. She returned to the kitchen with that detail folded into her mind like a note she would later need. Upstairs, laughter spilled down the stairwell. Footsteps moved. A hairdryer whined. Brooke hovered near the island while Nora unpacked. Every time Nora reached for a utensil, Brooke offered to fetch it first. "Where do you want the boards?" Nora asked. "Living room, near the windows," Brooke said. "The lake looks romantic. Even like this." Nora smiled politely. Storm's coming in. Brooke's smile tightened. They said that last week, too. The first of the guests came down the stairs, and the room changed the way rooms always did when people arrived. It filled, it tightened, it gained warmth and tension. Delia Hart appeared first. She was the bride, and she wore the role with a kind of careful fragility, as if she were holding something delicate and valuable and was terrified it would crack. Her hair fell in soft waves, and she kept touching her ring, smoothing it as if it could be polished into certainty. Harper Wynne followed close behind her, tall and angular, with eyes that missed nothing. She moved like someone who expected trouble and had decided long ago not to be surprised by it. Sienna Vale came down next, immaculate in a cream sweater dress that looked chosen for photographs. Her lipstick was a deep berry, precise as a signature. She blotted it with a tissue without smearing, then glanced at her reflection in the black window as if the lake itself were a mirror. Talia Morse trailed them, phone in hand, thumb tapping at the screen as if she could will better service into existence. She counted her steps without realizing it. 1, 2, 3, then stopped when she noticed Nora watching. Elise Hart, the groom's sister, descended last. She wore jeans and a cardigan, a small gold signet ring on her finger that she rotated absently as if it were a habit that calmed her. "Nora," Delia said, brightening. "Thank you for doing this. Brooke said you saved us." "I just brought food," Nora said. Harper's gaze flicked to the pastry boxes, then to Nora. "You're local?" "Born and raised," Nora said. "I know the roads out here. If they tell you to stay put tonight, you should." Brooke's laugh came too quickly. "We're not getting snowed in. It's a bridal shower, not a survival exercise." Harper didn't laugh. "Tell that to the lake." Nora turned back to her work. She arranged boards, set out small bowls of olives and honey, placed napkins and tongues with the quiet satisfaction of order. When she brought out the small cards she always used to mark allergens, she paused at Harper. "Tree nuts," she said, low enough that it wouldn't become a performance. Harper nodded. "Severe." "I kept everything separate," Nora said. "If you want, I can plate yours first." "You're an angel," Delia said, then looked guilty, as if even that word were too big. Harper leaned in. "If I die this weekend, it'll be because one of these women forgets and kills me with a special macaron," she said, dry as winter air. Sienna's smile was tight. "We know. We've known for years. People know a lot of things," Harper said. "Then they get distracted." Delia made a small sound halfway between a laugh and a plea. "Harper, please." Harper softened immediately, a brief shift that revealed how much of her sharpness was armor. "I'm fine," she said. "I'm just not interested in being a tragic footnote at your wedding." Nora finished labeling and stepped back. The house for a while felt almost gentle. Music played low. Gift tissue rustled. Brooke poured sparkling water into glasses and kept refilling them, as if staying busy could keep the weather outside at bay. But the wind pressed harder against the windows, and the lake kept its dull, watchful shine. By late afternoon, the light had thinned. The sky lowered. The lake turned the color of slate. A wet, granular snow began to fall in slow diagonals, the flakes sticking to the porch screens before sliding away. Inside, Brooke lit a few candles anyway, not out of need, but because the flicker made everything feel warmer. "Okay," she announced, clapping her hands. "Toasts. Everyone has to say one thing they love about Delia and one thing they're excited for at the wedding. No crying." "Impossible," Sienna said, but she blotted her lipstick again as if tears were a threat to her work. Delia sat on the rug in front of the fireplace, gifts stacked around her like soft-colored barricades. She smiled, but her fingers kept finding her ring, smoothing it. Talia hovered near an outlet, phone plugged in, her face angled toward the screen as if she expected it to confess something. Elise sat on the edge of an armchair, hands folded, signet ring turning slowly. Harper stood near the kitchen doorway, watching the room with a quiet intensity. She had the posture of someone waiting for the moment beneath the moment. Nora, technically off duty now that the food was set, stayed near the kitchen, tidying as she went. It was her nature. It also gave her a reason to listen, without appearing to listen. Brooke's toast was first. It was perfect. Warm, polished, punctuated by a memory that made everyone laugh on cue. She lifted her glass and looked around the room as if she were taking attendance. Sienna's toast followed, a little too earnest, the kind of speech that had been rewritten until it was smooth. She used the word forever twice. Each time, she blotted her lipstick and smiled. Talia's toast was brief and slightly breathless. She kept glancing at her phone, even as she spoke. You deserve someone who picks you, she said, and then seemed startled by her own words. Elise stood last. She held her glass with both hands. I'm grateful, she said. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the room. Delia, you make my brother better. You make all of us softer. I'm excited to have you. Her signet ring rotated once, then stopped. Delia's eyes shone. Thank you, she whispered. Harper's toast came with no warning. She didn't stand. She didn't lift her glass high. She looked at Delia and said, I love you enough to ruin a moment if it keeps you safe. The room went still, the way rooms did when someone stepped too close to a buried thing. Delia's smile wavered. Harper? Harper held up a hand. Not now, she said. Not in front of everyone. Later. Sienna's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Elise's ring began to turn again. Nora felt the air change. She set a dish towel down and kept her movements slow and unobtrusive. Brooke laughed too loudly. Okay, great. Later. Now, music. We need something happy. She picked up her phone and frowned. The Wi-Fi is being weird. Use the speaker, Sienna said. It's paired. Brooke gestured toward the Bluetooth speaker on the sideboard, a squat black thing with a small glowing light. It won't connect, Brooke said, frustrated. Nora, you're good with this stuff. Can you? Nora wiped her hands and stepped over. She opened the Bluetooth menu and saw a list of device names. Brooke's phone, Sienna's, Delia's, and one more, grayed out, but recently present, Harperwin. Nora didn't comment. She tapped, tried pairing, then finally got music to play. Something soft and upbeat, chosen to fill the room with a safer mood. As she stepped away, she caught a glimpse of Harper's screen across the room. Harper's thumb moving fast, the kind of motion that belonged to someone sending something before they lost their nerve. Harper looked up and met Nora's gaze. Storm's coming, Nora said, because it was the only safe sentence she had. Harper's mouth twitched. Storm's already here, she said. A sharp gust hit the porch. The screens rattled, the candles leaned and recovered. Then the lights flickered. A collective sound rose, a murmur, a laugh, a small anxious oh. The lights flickered again. Nora found herself counting without meaning to. 1 flicker, 2, 3. And then the house went completely dark. For half a second there was silence, the kind that came when everyone held their breath at once. Then someone shrieked, a brief, startled sound. It's fine, Brooke said too quickly. It's fine. There are candles. Nora moved automatically. She knew where the candles were because she had watched Brooke light them. She reached her hands, finding warm glass. Flashlight, Delia said, voice small. Front hall, Brooke called, drawer by the coats. Nora stepped carefully toward the hall. The dark was thick in an unfamiliar house full of edges waiting to bruise. She heard feet shifting, someone bumping into a chair, Talia whispering an anxious prayer into her phone like it was a talisman. In the hall, Nora pulled the drawer open and found a flashlight. She clicked it on. A thin beam cut the dark. Sienna appeared, her face pale in the cone of light. Give me that, she said, and took it, her fingers brushing the lens. Nora watched, thinking absurdly of lipstick and fingerprints. Then she let it go. There were bigger things than cosmetics. I'll check, Brooke said. No, Harper said sharp. Stay, don't split up. Harper, you don't get to be in charge, Brooke snapped, and then seemed to regret it. Sienna's flashlight beam jittered, catching faces in fragments. Delia's wide eyes, Talia's trembling mouth, Elise's hand twisting her ring. Harper's voice cut through the dark tighter than before. Dell. Delia turned, and the flashlight beam found Harper's face. Her skin had gone a shade paler, the light catching a faint sheen at her hairline. My mouth is tingling, Harper said. She swallowed, and the swallow looked like work. Nora, did anything have nuts? Nora's stomach dropped. Not on your plate, she said too fast because panic always tried to run ahead of truth. I kept yours separate. Harper let out a short breath that sounded almost like a laugh and almost like fear. Then someone touched it. Sienna made an impatient sound. Harper, you're spiraling. She's not, Nora said. Harper, do you have your EpiPen? Harper's hand went to her pocket, then to her purse on the chair. Yeah, I always... Her words broke on another swallow. She blinked hard, and for the first time that day, her sharpness slipped. It's itching, she whispered, and the word was small and human. Nora's mind went to her own kit. Antihistamines, a little bottle of liquid Benadryl she kept for kids who reacted to strawberries or bee stings at summer weddings. She had tucked it into the pantry earlier, out of the way of the pretty part. "In the pantry," Nora said, already moving. "I have antihistamine." Elise appeared at her shoulder, voice quick and soft. "I'll help," she said. "I know where it is. Brooke showed me the pantry earlier." Nora hesitated, a fraction too long. The house was dark. Delia was shaking. Brooke was shouting about the generator. The room was a swarm of half-seen hands. Harper's phone lit briefly in her palm as she checked something. Service, a timer, a message, then went dark again. Elise's fingers closed around the phone with a practiced gentleness. "Let me hold that," Elise said, and in the confusion Harper let it go. The flashlight beam swung away. A candle flared. Someone bumped Nora's shoulder. Nora heard Elise murmur, "Come on," and heard Harper's footsteps, unsteady but moving toward the kitchen. Nora followed, but Brooke's voice rose sharp behind her. "Generator. There's supposed to be a generator." "In the garage," Elise's voice called back from the kitchen, already farther away. Nora swung her head toward the sound. In the darkness, Elise moved past a soft shape. As she brushed close, Nora caught a faint scent, sweet, almost marzipan. Almond. Nora's throat tightened. She didn't have time to name why. The kitchen was a smear of shadow. Nora's eyes adjusted slowly. In the dim candlelight, she saw the floor near the freezer. A wet trail, thin, glistening, ran from the freezer corner toward the pantry hall, as if someone had carried a bowl of ice and let it drip. Nora's brain cataloged it without judgment. Ice water trail, fresh, leading toward the pantry. From the pantry hall came the scrape of a door, then the faint, deliberate click of metal. It could have been anything. A cabinet, a latch, a padlock. "Did you hear that?" Nora asked. No one answered. The wind battered the house and the dark swallowed small sounds. Minutes stretched. Brooke found the garage door by feel. Someone struck a match. Another candle lit, then another. Finally, a low mechanical hum began, and a few lights glowed weakly, enough to make the house visible again, but not enough to make it comfortable. The generator had taken hold. Brooke's laugh was brittle. "See? Fine. Totally fine." Harper wasn't where she had been. Delia looked around, confusion sharpening into fear. "Harper?" Sienna swept the flashlight beam across the living room. "Harper, stop it!" No answer. Talia's phone buzzed once, then went dead again. "I don't have service," she whispered, as if service were the only thing holding the world together. Brooke stood very still. "She's probably in the bathroom," she said, "or outside for air." "Outside?" Nora repeated because the idea was insane. The windows showed nothing but a smear of snow and darkness. Delia's voice cracked. Harper wouldn't go outside. Nora's mind went to the wet trail, to the pantry door with no knob on the inside. She felt her heart begin to beat harder, as if it had recognized something before she had. "We should search," Nora said. Brooke nodded too quickly. Yes, we'll search." The house, half lit and humming, seemed suddenly full of corners. They searched the obvious places first, because that was what people did when they were trying not to panic. "Harper," Delia called up the stairs. "This isn't funny," Sienna snapped, the flashlight beam slicing through hallways. Nora moved like a ghost behind them, listening for anything that didn't belong, the scrape of a shoe, the soft breath of someone hiding, the thin sound of distress. The downstairs bathroom was empty. The upstairs bedrooms were empty. The porch door was locked, snow-packed against the sill like frosting. Harper's boots were still by the front door. Her coat was draped over the back of a chair. Delia stared at them as if her mind couldn't reconcile those objects with Harper's absence. "She didn't leave," she whispered. Nora's eyes went to the kitchen, then the pantry hall. The wet trail on the floor had begun to dull, but it still caught light, little beads of melting ice water leading toward that heavy door. "The pantry," Nora said. Brooke blinked. "Why would she be in the pantry?" "Because I used it," Nora said. "Because people go there to get things. Because it's the only place in this house that feels wrong." Sienna scoffed too quick. "It's a pantry." "Just check it," Nora said, and surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. They moved down the short hall. The pantry door stood closed. The brass hasp was down. The padlock hung through it, shut. And beside the frame, on its hook, the key still dangled on twine. Delia made a small, strangled sound. "How?" Brooke's face went pale beneath her careful makeup. That can't be. The key's right there." Sienna's flashlight beam fixed on the key as if it were a verdict. Nora reached for the padlock. The metal was cold enough to sting. She lifted it slightly, felt its weight, and the old, familiar mechanism under her fingers. "This kind of lock," she said, voice controlled, "doesn't have to be locked with the key." Brooke stared at her. "What do you mean?" Nora didn't answer immediately. She was aware of the way everyone had leaned in, as if the explanation might save them from what they already suspected. She took the key off the hook. She fitted it into the lock. It turned with a gritty reluctance, then clicked free. Nora opened the padlock, lifted the hasp, and pulled the door toward her. It swung outward. Cold air spilled out, smelling of paper, canned soup, and something faintly sweet. Harper lay on the floor between shelves, her body at an angle that made Nora's stomach drop. One arm was bent beneath her. The other was extended toward the door, fingers curled as if she had tried to claw her way through wood. Her face was pale, lips slightly parted. There was no blood, no violence that made itself obvious. Only stillness. Delia's cry was low and animal. She surged forward, then stopped as if a wall had risen between her and Harper. Sienna covered her mouth with her hand, smearing her lipstick slightly now, finally breaking the perfect line. Brooke backed up, hand to her throat. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Talia's breath came in short, thin bursts, as if she were trying not to faint. Nora stepped into the pantry carefully, as if she were entering a room full of broken glass. She crouched near Harper, not touching, just looking. There were faint blotches along Harper's neck, red and raised. Her eyes were half open, unfocused. Allergy, Nora thought, with a kind of sick clarity. Harper's purse lay on a lower shelf, half open. Nora glanced inside without moving it much. No EpiPen. "Delia," Nora said softly because she needed Delia to hear her. "Don't touch anything yet." Delia looked at her like a person waking from a bad dream. "Why?" "Because someone did this," Nora said. Her voice sounded calm, and that calmness frightened her. "And we have to be able to prove it." Brooke's eyes flashed, sudden anger trying to cover fear. "Are you saying?" Nora looked at the padlock, at the key now in her hand, at the hook still swinging slightly. "The door doesn't open from the inside," she said. Sienna's flashlight beam trembled. "That's not. People can't." "It's an old cold room conversion," Nora said. "No interior knob. I noticed earlier." Brooke shook her head hard as if she could dislodge the words. "I didn't. I never." "Brooke," Delia whispered, voice raw, "please don't make this about you." Nora backed out slowly and closed the pantry door partway, not latching it, just reducing the room's exposure. Harper's stillness felt too intimate, too wrong to leave on display. "We need help," Talia said. "We need to call." Nora pulled out her phone. The screen showed one bar, then none. She tried anyway. No signal. Brooke's Wi-Fi router blinked uselessly from a shelf. Outside, snow thickened against the windows. Wind rattled the house. Containment, Nora thought. Closed circle. Not because anyone wanted it that way, because the world had decided to shrink. "We wait until the storm eases," Nora said, "but we don't wait blind." She looked at each of them in turn and felt, for the first time, the weight of being the only person in the room who had not come here for love or nostalgia. She had come to work. Work now meant noticing what everyone else wanted not to see. They moved Harper into the living room only after Nora insisted they do it carefully. Blanket under her, gloves from the kitchen drawer, minimal contact with anything that might matter later. It wasn't dignity exactly. It was preservation. Brooke's hands shook as she fetched towels. She kept filling glasses with water, offering them to people who didn't drink. Delia sat on the floor near Harper's covered form, knees drawn up, her face turned away as if looking would make it real. Sienna took charge in a way that was almost convincing. "We need a plan," she said, voice crisp. "We need to write down where everyone was. We need to breathe," Talia whispered. Elise hovered near the doorway, pale, eyes glossy. Her signet ring turned and turned. Nora stood in the kitchen, staring at her work as if it belonged to someone else. Plates, crumbs, a half-eaten macaron. The house hummed with generator power that felt thin and unreliable. Allergy, she thought again. Nora opened the trash cabinet and pulled the bag out slightly, peering into it. She wasn't sure what she expected to find. An empty vial, a torn label, a confession written in frosting. But she did find something small, a napkin crumpled into a tight ball stuck to the side of the bag. When she unfolded it, she smelled a faint sweetness. almond. Her stomach tightened. She had made nut-free pastries. She was careful about it, careful enough that she felt her own guilt rise, instinctive and wrong. She went to her labeled jars. Vanilla extract sealed, cocoa sealed, almond paste, its lid slightly askew, the inner seal disturbed. Nora stared at it, then looked toward the living room where the others sat. Someone had been in her supplies. Someone had touched the one thing Harper could not safely touch. She set the jar down exactly where it had been and washed her hands until they were red. Behind her, Delia's phone chimed. The sound was small, but in the quiet it hit like a dropped dish. Delia stared at the screen as if it were a snake. It's Harper. Sienna moved instantly, leaning over her shoulder. Brooke leaned in too. Nora came to the doorway, not close enough to intrude, but close enough to hear. Delia's voice was barely a whisper as she read. Del, I'm sorry I made today heavy. You deserve peace tonight. I love you. We'll talk tomorrow. I promise. The message ended with a heart. Delia's breath caught. Brooke's eyes flicked to the covered form on the rug. She couldn't. Sienna swallowed hard. Maybe it was scheduled like one of those. Harper doesn't use hearts, Delia said, suddenly fierce. Not like that. Nora watched Elise. Elise's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her ring stopped turning for the first time since the body had been found. What time did it come in? Nora asked gently. Delia looked at the timestamp. 10:17. Nora's mind moved, quick and cold. The blackout had been at 9. The search had taken 15 minutes, 20. Harper had already been dead when they found her. 10:17 meant someone had held Harper's phone after, or Harper had set it to send, and someone had used that to their advantage. Nora said, "Where's Harper's phone?" Delia blinked. She always has it?" Sienna's eyes went wide, then narrowed. "We should find it." "We should," Nora agreed, "and we should do it carefully." She turned to Brooke. "What's the rule about the pantry key?" Brooke looked offended, as if the question itself was accusation. "It stays there. It always stays there. The owners told me. It's for bears or something. We don't move it." Nora nodded. "Has anyone been in the pantry tonight besides me?" Brooke opened her mouth, then looked around helplessly. "Everyone gets ice. Everyone." Nora's eyes went to the faint wetness still on the kitchen floor. The ice water trail had thinned, but it had not vanished. It led from the freezer to the pantry hall. "Did anyone carry ice during the blackout?" Nora asked. Sienna scoffed. "It was dark." "That's why I'm asking." Nora Celia hugged herself. "I didn't. I was trying to get service." Brooke said, "I stayed here. I was right here." She gestured to the living room, as if the room itself could testify. Delia's voice was hoarse. "I was with Brooke. We were lighting candles." Sienna lifted her chin. "I went to get the flashlight." Nora's gaze caught the flashlight lying on the sideboard now. In the weak light, she could see a faint smear on the barrel near the grip. A berry-colored mark, shaped like the edge of a mouth. Lipstick. Sienna's lips were still berry dark, still precise, but not quite as perfect as before. Red herring, Nora thought, without yet knowing why. Elise spoke softly. "I went to the bathroom," she said. "Downstairs. When it went out, panic makes me sick." Her ring began turning again. Nora nodded once, slow. "Okay," she said. "Okay, we'll write it down." She didn't write anything yet. She was still collecting. In the kitchen, she pulled a notepad from her bag and began to list, not names, but facts. Pantry door, no interior knob. Padlock snaps shut without key. Key on hook proves nothing. Almond paste seal disturbed. Apology text at 10:17. Heart used. Harper phone missing. Ice water trail to pantry hall. Lipstick smear on flashlight. The house creaked as the wind shifted. Snow scratched the windows like fingernails. Nora heard beneath everything the low hum of the generator, and beneath that, something else. The soft, repetitive sound of someone walking in socks across hardwood. She turned her head toward the hall. A faint, damp print marked the floor near the pantry corridor. 2 half-moons of moisture that caught the light for a moment before soaking in. Someone had wet socks. And someone in this house had something to hide. The night did not end cleanly. It stretched. It frayed. It turned every small sound into a question. Brooke insisted they stay together in the living room. She said it was safety, and maybe it was, but Nora could see another reason too. Brooke needed witnesses. She needed the room to remember her in it. At some point, Delia fell into a light, broken sleep with her head against the couch arm. Her hand still clutched her phone. Harper's message sat on the screen like a bruise. Sienna kept the flashlight in her lap, fingers wrapped around it as if it could keep the dark away. Every so often she blotted her lipstick, even though no one was looking. Talia sat near an outlet, staring at her dead phone like it had betrayed her. Elise went quiet, too quiet. Her ring turned, then stopped, then turned again, a small machine of anxiety. Nora waited. She waited because panic made people stupid, and she did not have the luxury of being stupid. When the house settled into a fragile hush, Nora stood and said softly, "I'm going to make coffee." Brooke's head snapped up. "Now?" "If we're going to be awake until morning," Nora said, "we should be awake with purpose." She moved into the kitchen. She didn't turn on overhead lights. She used the small under-cabinet glow, keeping the room dim. It felt safer that way, as if bright light might invite something else to happen. She brewed coffee with hands that did not shake. Then, quietly, she opened drawers, checked counters, looked for what didn't belong. Her eyes kept returning to the pantry hall. The ice water trail had dried, but the floor there looked slightly cleaner than the rest, as if someone had wiped it. A smear of dampness near the baseboard suggested a hurried cloth. Nora's gaze slid to the linen closet near the downstairs bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, not enough to be obvious, but enough to catch her attention. She stepped over and opened it. Sheets, towels, a basket of spare toiletries, and tucked behind a folded quilt, a black rectangle. Harper's phone. Nora's pulse jumped. She picked it up carefully, feeling the warmth of recent handling. The screen was locked, but the notifications were still visible, frozen in time like insects in amber. One was the perfect apology to Delia, sent at 10:17. Another, older, was a message draft, never sent. "If you play it, you're not just hurting me." Nora swallowed. She brought the phone to the kitchen island and, after a moment's thought, tried Harper's birthday as a passcode. Many people used obvious things because they believed their friends would never steal from them. The phone unlocked. Nora went to messages and found a group chat thread with an old name. Lake House Girls, 2015. Dozens of messages. Old jokes, old cruelty, hiding in laughter. Nora didn't read them all. She didn't need to. She went to the media attachments and found a recently deleted folder. Inside it was a single audio file, Voice Notes 4.2. Nora hesitated, then pressed play. The speaker on the phone was small, tinny. The voice that filled it was clear anyway, because cruelty tended to sharpen itself. "She's doing the ring thing again," a young woman's voice said, laughing. "Like she's in some movie. Delia thinks she's the main character. It's embarrassing." Someone else laughed. Then the first voice continued, lower now, like a confession shared among friends. "Harper keeps acting like she's going to save her. It's cute, like a watchdog who doesn't know the gate's already open." Nora's skin prickled. The voice was Elise's. Nora had heard her speak only softly tonight, only in careful phrases meant not to injure anyone. But voices did not lie when they thought they were among their own. The note went on. A few more seconds of laughter and casual malice. It ended with Elise saying, "Delete this," and then giggling as if deletion were a magic spell. Nora exhaled slowly. She scrolled back to the timestamp. The voice note had been deleted tonight, after the blackout. Someone had accessed Harper's phone and deleted the one thing Harper had been threatening to use. Nora set the phone down and looked toward the living room, where Elise sat in the dim light with her hands folded, ring turning. Motive, Nora thought. Opportunity. And now, proof. She needed one more thing. The physical act. The door. The lock. The EpiPen. Nora returned to Harper's purse, still sitting on the living room table where Delia had placed it when they moved Harper's body. She asked quietly, "Delia, does Harper always keep her EpiPen in here?" Delia blinked up at her eyes swollen. "Yes! She checks it like a habit." Nora opened the purse just enough to look. Still no EpiPen. She glanced at the tote bags piled near the stairs, Sienna's, Delia's, Talia's, Elise's. In the chaos, they had been thrown together like driftwood. Nora went to Elise's tote last, not because she wanted to avoid her, but because she wanted the moment to be clean. "Elise," Nora said softly. Elise looked up, startled. "What? May I check your bag?" Nora asked. "Everyone's. Harper's medicine is missing." Elise's face tightened. "Why mine?" "Because I'm checking all of them," Nora said evenly. Sienna's eyes gleamed in the dim. "This is ridiculous." Brooke said too quickly, Do it. We need to know." Elise's hands clenched. Her ring stopped turning. Nora opened Elise's tote. On top, tissues, a paperback novel, a phone charger. Beneath, a sweater folded too neatly for someone in panic. And beneath the sweater, half hidden under a scarf, a red plastic cylinder. An EpiPen. Delia made a sound that wasn't quite a scream. Elise's face drained of color. She began. I must have. When it went out, I grabbed. Nora lifted the EpiPen and held it up. The red cap gleamed in the weak light like a warning. You took it, Nora said, voice calm because if she let anger rise, it would drown her. During the blackout. Elise shook her head hard. No, Harper was always waving it around and I thought maybe she dropped it and I... Her words stumbled over themselves, too quick, too practiced. Nora looked at Delia. The apology message, she said. It wasn't Harper. Delia's eyes filled again, this time with something sharper than grief. Elise, she whispered. Elise's mouth opened, closed. Her ring began to turn again, faster now like a trapped mechanism. And then, with a suddenness that made Nora's spine go cold, Elise lunged, reaching for Nora's coat pocket, fingers grasping as if she could pull the truth back out once it had surfaced. Nora stepped aside and kept her hand over the phone through the fabric, holding it in place. Elise froze, breathing hard. Outside, the storm eased into a quieter snow. Dawn began to thin the dark at the edges. Nora said softly, We're going to talk in the morning. Elise's eyes flicked toward the front door, toward the windows, toward the world beyond the house, and Nora understood with a sinking certainty that Elise would try to run. Morning arrived without kindness. Light seeped through the windows, gray and diluted. The lake beyond lay hidden under a skin of snow and fog. The generator still hummed, stubborn, as if it too were afraid of the quiet. Brooke made coffee and kept her hands busy, offering mugs to people who could barely hold them. Her face looked older than it had yesterday, lines appearing as if drawn by stress. Delia sat upright now, no longer asleep, her grief transformed into something steady and cold. She stared at her ring as if she were meeting it for the first time. Sienna's lipstick had faded, finally. She looked exposed without it. Talia's hands shook as she wrapped them around a mug. Elise paced near the fireplace, restless. Her signet ring turned. Nora stood near the sideboard with Harper's phone in her pocket, feeling its weight like a stone. Brooke's voice was hoarse. The roads, are they open? Nora checked her own phone again. One bar flickered, then two. Signal, thin but present. She called 911 and spoke in short, clear sentences. The dispatcher's voice sounded far away but real. Help was coming, slowly, carefully, because the world outside was still half frozen. When Nora hung up, she looked at the room and said, Before anyone else speaks to the police, we need to be honest with ourselves. Sienna scoffed. We've been honest. No, Nora said. We've been scared. Brooke's eyes flashed. Are you going to accuse someone in my living room? Nora nodded. Yes. Silence fell, heavy as wet snow. Nora took a breath and began where logic began, with the thing that looked impossible until you understood it. The pantry, she said. Everyone keeps circling it like it's a locked room trick. The key was on the hook, so people think it couldn't have been locked. Elise's pacing slowed. Nora continued. That padlock doesn't require the key to be locked. You can snap it shut with your hands. You could shut it and hang the key back on the hook without ever using it. Brooke's mouth opened. Closed, Nora added, and the pantry door has no interior knob. Once it's latched, you can't open it from inside. Talia made a small sound of horror, as if she were only now understanding what Harper's last minutes had been. Delia's eyes fixed on Elise. Nora moved to the next part. Harper died from an allergic reaction. The marks on her neck, the swelling, the way she was. It wasn't an accident. Someone tampered with the nut-free desserts. Sienna's face went pale. Are you saying you? I didn't, Nora said sharp. But someone opened my almond paste jar. The seal was broken. It was moved. Brooke whispered, I never touched your stuff. You stayed in the living room, Nora said. Delia saw you. Sienna saw you. You didn't leave during the blackout. Brooke's shoulders sagged with something like relief mixed with shame. She nodded once, as if being cleared was its own kind of indictment. Nora turned slightly, her gaze moving around the room, letting the others feel it. There was an ice water trail on the kitchen floor, she said, from the freezer to the pantry hall. Someone carried ice in the dark. Someone walked that path. Talia swallowed. It could have been anyone. Not anyone, Nora said. because someone later tried to wipe it up, and because someone had wet socks afterward. Sienna's chin lifted. This is... Nora cut her off gently. The lipstick smear on the flashlight, she said. That was Sienna. She grabbed it first. That's not evidence of murder. That's evidence of someone trying to see. Sienna's mouth tightened, anger flushing her cheeks. Thank you, she said, venomous. Nora didn't flinch. Harper's phone went missing, she continued. A message was sent from it at 10:17. A perfect apology, with a heart. Delia's voice was quiet and dangerous. Harper doesn't use hearts. Nora nodded. I found Harper's phone in the linen closet near the downstairs bathroom. Someone hid it there. Elise's ring stopped. Nora reached into her pocket and pulled out the phone. She placed it on the table where everyone could see it without touching it. In recently deleted, Nora said, there was a voice note from an old group chat. It was deleted last night after the blackout. Elise's breath came shallow. Nora? It's your voice, Nora said, not loud, not cruel. Just true. You were laughing about humiliating Delia. You called Harper a watchdog. Delia's face went still. Elise, she whispered again, and this time it was not a question. It was a verdict. Elise's eyes filled with tears that looked for a moment almost real. That was years ago, she said. I was awful. I was God. I was awful, but I'm not that person. Then why delete it? Nora asked softly. Elise's tears fell, because Harper was going to ruin everything. Sienna let out a shaky breath. Brooke stared at the floor. Delia's hands clenched. What was she going to do? Elise swallowed, and her ring began to turn again, faster. She was going to play it. For tonight. She said she would. She said she didn't care if it burned the wedding down. She said she loved you more than she loved peace. Delia's eyes closed briefly, as if the words hurt in a familiar way. Nora said, Harper's EpiPen was in your tote. Elise flinched as if struck. That's not a mistake, Nora continued. That's not panic. That's intent. Elise's mouth twisted. I didn't. She dropped it. I picked it up. I meant to give it back. And then you locked her in a pantry that can't be opened from inside, Nora said. A pantry you didn't even know was dangerous until you used it, unless you'd already noticed the door. Elise's gaze flicked involuntarily toward the pantry hall, and in that flicker Nora saw it. Recognition. Familiarity. The kind that came from having opened that door before. Nora's voice stayed calm. You were the one who brushed past me in the dark, she said. You smelled like almond paste. Elise's breathing sped up. Delia stood abruptly, the movement sharp enough to make everyone jump. Did you kill her? She asked, voice trembling with contained fury. Elise's face crumpled. I didn't mean, she began. I didn't mean for her to. Nora felt cold settle in her chest. But you did mean for her not to be able to save herself, she said. You meant for her not to have the EpiPen. You meant for the door to stay shut. Elise's tears became sobs. She wouldn't stop, she said. She wouldn't let me be better. She kept me trapped in who I was. No, Delia said, and the word cut clean. You trapped her. Elise's shoulders shook. Her ring slipped from her fingers and clinked softly against the hardwood. Outside, a distant sound rose, tires on slush, an engine working hard. A knock came at the door, loud and real. Brooke rushed to open it. Cold air swept in, carrying the scent of snow and exhaust. A county deputy stood on the porch, hat rimmed with wet flakes. Behind him, another officer, and an EMT with a bag. Nora stepped back, letting the world outside reclaim the house. Elise sank to her knees. Delia stared at her, eyes dry now. Grief hardened into something that would last. As the officers began asking questions, Nora moved to the window and looked out at the lake. The water was still indifferent. Snow softened the edges of the world, making everything look gentler than it was. Inside, the bridal shower decorations sat half-fallen, pastel tissue paper like shed skin. The candles had burned low. The speaker was silent. Nora watched her own breath fog the glass and thought, with a tired clarity, that some silences were not peaceful. Some were built.